Please take your seats quickly, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Tennis Weekly with Joel, Kim and Chris. On today's Tour Catch-Up, sponsored by DownloadTennis.com.
Djokovic exacts revenge on Alcaraz.
Coco Gauff wins the biggest title of her career again.
And Jamie Murray falls just short in the men's doubles.
Kim, today is the 21st of August and we are here to catch up on the week in tennis at Tennis Weekly HQ. Novak Djokovic and Coco Gauff are your Cincinnati champions, and we can just catch our breath, can't we? We're now in the build-up to the US Open, the last week before the last Grand Slam of the year, and what a treat we had last night into the early hours. I'm not going to lie, I am still catching up on my beauty sleep that I foregoed from watching Djokovic Alcaraz, which ended just around pleasantly kind of 2 a.m. local time in the UK.
Just the perfect way to start off the work week, being really tired from staying up late, watching tennis the night before.
It was one of those, I know this is going to be bad for me in the morning, but at the same time, I was like, Joel, you'd be an idiot to turn this off.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those just absolutely brilliant, breathtaking at times matches, worthy obviously of a Grand Slam final. And it's just, another, I guess, rendition in their sort of burgeoning early days of their rivalry. And you couldn't not watch it if you'd started. So, you may look a little worse for wear today, Joel, but I think, it was worth it.
Yeah, it was certainly a sight, a spectacle that fitted the occasion. And I say Coco Gauff as well, just going to new heights. So we'll be discussing all of that. We're also going to be discussing the WTA end of season finals, which still doesn't have a location, much to the annoyance of On Jabeur. And we got lots to talk about, and I'm excited because you are back on the show, because I think you've been traveling, you've been away, and you're back in HQ, and we've got a double header to look forward to this week.
I know, I'm back with a bang because I've got 2 episodes in 4 days. So I'm very much back, and had a nice little time away, traveling around a bit. And I mean, my highlight though, whilst I've been away, is actually something from our listener, Kenny Koala Bear, who was also on their travels and who messaged us very nicely on Twitter to say that they'd been inspired by the podcast to have their very first Hugo on holiday. Wow. And they very much enjoyed it. So thanks for sharing that with us, because that made my time off from the podcast when I saw that, because everyone loves a Hugo. I mean, it's everyone's drink of choice, or it should be.
You got to remind me, what is a Hugo again? I've already forgotten.
Oh, Joel, it's Prosecco, elderflower, cordial,
I'm sold already.
Soda water, mint leaves. It's the most refreshing thing you could possibly ever want.
Yes. It's the Tennis Weekly drink of choice.
It is.
And, yes.
Absolutely.
So really great to see, wasn't it? I mean, my highlight was actually on the tennis court, and it was something I noticed on Novak Djokovic's run to being Cincinnati champion. He had a match against Gael Monfils, and I know that their rivalry has been one of the most lopsided rivalries in the Open era. And in fact, with the defeat of Gael Monfils by Novak Djokovic in Cincinnati, he has now beaten him for a 19th straight time. So Novak Djokovic is 19-0 against Gael Monfils, and it is now officially the most one-sided ATP Tour matchup. So, it was tied with Nadal and Gasquet, which I think says a lot, given that it's gone one further than that.
Yeah, and I think there's some other sort of very one-sided things, like Federer, David Ferrer. Federer, usually they have a 17-0, but Novak Djokovic, Gael Monfils. Poor Gael Monfils. He must be thinking, what on earth do I need to do to get that one win?
And I think Djokovic actually signed a T-shirt for Monfils that said "sorry, not sorry." Like, he was just sort of rubbing it. I mean, it was obviously done in a kind of jokey, playful banter type way. But I sort of, my instant reaction was he's just rubbing salt in the wound there.
I thought you were going to say he had a football shirt of the number 19 on or something.
Oh, like a Roger Federer, Andy Roddick, Wimbledon cardigan situation.
With the gold lettering number 15.
I would love that. If they have another matchup, I want. Can there be a limited edition Lacoste jacket that Djokovic comes on with like an embroidered 19-0?
Or 20, knowing he's going to win the next one as well if they get there. But talking of football, Joel, I was quite pleased to also see Billie Jean King at the Women's World Cup final in Australia. That was nice to
I was
have tennis represented.
I was perplexed. I was confused. I was like, hang on, USA aren't here. What was is this kind of like championing women's sport in general, and Billie Jean King's an icon of that? That's it, right?
I think she was doing a speech at some sort of related function, but I always look to see if she's in that pink magenta sort of blazer that I know you love so much, but she wasn't. But it was nice to see her there. But and obviously England losing out in the football, but
sad times.
Hopefully, I know, sad times. Spain winning. They didn't win Cincinnati though, did they? Because Novak Djokovic came out on top against Carlos Alcaraz.
Yeah, they couldn't have it. They couldn't have it all, could they? But I was a little bit down in the dumps from that result on Sunday morning, but certainly the tennis in the evening did perk me right up.
Yes, because Novak Djokovic very much avenged his Wimbledon final defeat in yet another thriller. He had to save a match point in the second set. You know, Alcaraz could have got the job done in 2 sets, but
should have maybe.
Yeah, should have. And Djokovic, taking it into a third set. Then Alcaraz saving, multiple match points himself, taking into a tiebreak. I mean, it had all the ups and downs and oohs and ahs of that Wimbledon final, what we've seen from them already. And I mean, just bringing it onto the hard court, we've seen them on multiple surfaces already so far this year, over the last couple of months. All the matches have been interesting in their own right, and maybe, arguably getting better each time. And I think with this result, everyone's thinking, all right, we're going to have the next instalment at the US Open, please.
Well, I mean, it's two apiece now, and it is fascinating how it has gone from the the grass courts to the hard courts, but regardless of what surfaces, they are just there to entertain. And I think what's so compelling about this matchup is just the shot making that they are able to produce, particularly under pressure. I mean, some of the ways that Alcaraz saved some of those championship points that Novak Djokovic had was unbelievable. And, to think that Djokovic was, a set down, he looked like, to be honest, he didn't even look like he was going to finish the match at one point in that second set. He looked very much like the heat was getting to him. The conditions just generally across the week have been very, very tough. And at one stage I was wondering, like, is Djokovic gonna retire here? Yeah,
but we have seen that from him before, where he's looked a bit down and out, struggling physically with the heat. Very draining conditions out in Cincinnati, and actually he did compare this match to the Australian Open final that he played against Rafa in 2012, which went almost 6 hours, and players needing a chair afterwards because the conditions were so draining.
I did watch the ceremony wondering and thinking, were they going to get offered a chair to kind of sit down on if they were going to stand up? But it didn't obviously get to that. But yeah, it was such a physical battle. And I think what did interest me was the fact that it felt like Alcaraz coming into this final, he was fresh as a daisy, and it was really Djokovic who was suffering from the conditions. And going into the US Open, I do wonder if, of course, Djokovic will be put on the night session, more often than not, given top billing. And I think that will suit him. But if he is given a day session and, the conditions are similar to the kind of Cincinnati, they're hot, they're humid and sticky, I certainly think that adds a level of vulnerability to Djokovic that a player that still has to be, I think, at the top of their game can exploit. But I certainly feel like there's a difference between Novak Djokovic in day session conditions and Novak Djokovic in cooler early evening, late night conditions. And I think we saw that in this final, because it felt like the more the sun setted, during the match, the more that Novak Djokovic came into the ascendancy.
Yeah, and that might play a crucial factor if they do meet at the US Open, because you've obviously got best of 5. It's over a 2 weeks. It's more grueling if Novak's getting embroiled into perhaps longer drawn out matches earlier on in the tournament, and the conditions are like they've been in Cincy, then he may not, get to that point in if they were to meet in the final where he is as fresh as he was yesterday, even though he didn't look at all fresh yesterday for parts of it. But I mean, yeah, at age 36, the fact that he's able to fend off a Carlos Alcaraz at age 20 who just plays lights out tennis, that all credit to Djokovic. He is the supreme master of masters series. He's won his 39th Masters 1000 crown, which incidentally he's on his 95th title overall, so he'll be counting down to 100
century.
titles. Century of titles soon. He's actually one win away, which would be a Monte Carlo title, from having won all 9 Masters events 3 times each, which no one has done that before. So he is continuing to break and sort of knock off records. But yeah, the fact that he was able to take everything that Carlos Alcaraz kind of threw at him and still come out on top, given these conditions and given his age, he like we said, he was relating this match to the 2012 Australian Open final. That was 11 years ago, and he's still able to kind of hustle and battle his way through. And he did also sort of say, it is reminiscent of his battles against Rafa when they were both in their prime, like in that AO final of 2012. And, we've said Alcaraz has a lot of similarities to Rafa, but it really does kind of give you that that feeling when you're watching these two, the top 2 players on the tour in the world at the moment, giving us these showdowns. It definitely gives me those vibes. As a Rafa fan, I'm loving what I'm seeing from Alcaraz.
Definitely, and I think what's so fascinating about this period is that we are in a period of transition, and with Nadal on the on the injury shelf at the moment, we are getting this kind of intergenerational battle between Djokovic and Alcaraz, and it's just fascinating to see 2 players from different eras, from different positions in their careers, just go out onto the tennis court, give it their all, and produce these matches that are just so thrilling, and they feel like they just kind of pick up from where they left off last time at Wimbledon. And I think it really is something to savour, the fact that we don't really get these intergenerational matchups that often. We got that sort of crossover, I think, between Pete Sampras and Roger Federer, and we always remember about that that match that they had at Wimbledon, which was almost kind of a passing of the torch. But I always feel like they only come up and you really recognise and appreciate them in these transition moments. And I think it was fascinating, I think, to think about Alcaraz after Wimbledon. People were thinking again similar, is this the passing of the torch? But Novak Djokovic has really come back here and said, well, actually, not just yet. And he's proven that regardless of what he appears to look like on the court, whether he feels like he's physically ailing or he's just struggling on the court, he is just able to go to places other players I don't think are able to go to mentally and really battle back from the brink. And that for me was a real kind of joy to, I think, watch unfold in this match. And a lot of people I think would say it's fascinating to see that play out over best of 5, but even in this kind of best of 3 set format, it was just as thrilling.
Yeah, and almost, often longer than a 5-set match, 3 hours, 49 minutes. Plenty of matches at Grand Slams do not last that long on their best of 5. But I think from Djokovic's perspective, he's in the twilight years of his career. He could happily just sort of, play and kind of rack up more titles, but do so without much of a real sort of fire in his belly, a real challenge. But I think having Alcaraz here is actually, even in the twilight stages of his career, Djokovic is going to have to continue to learn and grow and adapt to kind of overcome what Alcaraz is giving him. So actually, if you're looking at it from Djokovic's perspective, it's a new challenge. He can't just sort of take everything for granted. It's going to make him, learn and adapt more. And Alcaraz has, from his perspective, so much that he can just soak up from Djokovic. And every time he plays him, with all those years of experience. I mean, he's got so much to learn from all of these encounters. So I think they're both, what I'm hoping they're both going to get out of it is that it's not just playing this fantastic tennis with each other and delighting the crowd, but just really learning from each other and using this kind of quite unique moment in both of their careers, actually, you know, one at the beginning, one at the end. Without wanting, I'm not saying Djokovic is going to retire imminently, but, you know, he could have several more years in him yet. But I think it's not just a quick changing of the guard, is it? We're probably going to have this period where these two are the dominant force. And I think it's going to be quite an interesting one to kind of, I don't know, get into and sort of analyse when we see each of their matches and what they bring to the table.
Yeah, and I think one way that I saw Djokovic do something new or something I've not really seen much of him do before in a tennis court was serve and volley. He was bringing out that a lot as a tactic against Carlos Alcaraz in this match. I mean, Alcaraz was so far behind the baseline at times, and Djokovic, as I said, kind of felt that was an opportunity for him to come in, whether that was on the first serve or even sometimes it was on the second serve as well. And yeah, it's fascinating to see. I think these players kind of learn in the moment and, you know, think about what strategies I can bring in to overcome this player, and to see Djokovic, as I said, willing to kind of think about things a bit differently, because you sort of normally associate him with being at the back of the court. We all know his smash is not necessarily on point all of the time, but to see him, as I say, kind of come into the net more often than not and kill off the point whilst Alcaraz sort of lulling around at the back, to me was quite interesting in terms of, you know, tactics that Djokovic is looking to employ that can get him the upper hand, so that, you know, he's not just necessarily embroiled in all these rallies from the back of the court where we just know both of their shot making capabilities can mean that really from any part of that court they could potentially turn defense into offense and hit a winner.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's really interesting to see how they're both adapting to try and get that upper hand. And I mean, we've mentioned briefly, but going into the US Open, they will be the top two seeds. Alcaraz is still just the world number one, but Djokovic just needs to win, I think, one match at Flushing Meadows and he will retake that number one ranking. So it seems somewhat inevitable that it will soon be Djokovic's again. But I mean, these two would be scheduled to meet in the final, and barring kind of any injuries or upsets, we could be in for an absolute corker of a Grand Slam final again between these two. Given what we've seen in Cincinnati, Joel, can you pick a clear favourite between the two, or do you think it's literally just going to come down to a point here or there? Very, very fine margins.
Yeah, it's really tough. I think, for me, I think they both go in as favourites, and I personally can't separate the two of them. I think they're both really on song at the moment. And I think for Alcaraz, I mean, in Cincinnati, I think it did click in the final. I don't think he showed his best tennis, I think, on the journey to there. But once he came up against Djokovic, something just clicked for him, and it just showed, I think, what a big match player he is. So maybe there's a little bit of uncertainty maybe around getting to that moment, given, as I say, kind of what we've seen this week, and to be honest, what we saw, you know, last week in the Rogers Cup in Toronto. But I think what you see is what you get, and you know where Novak Djokovic his level is at, and the fact that he's just come in one tournament, his first tournament in North America, I think, for, you know, a few years, given, you know, all the rules and regulations around you know, his COVID and vaccination status. I personally would put them level pegging. It's just for me too hard to split. Where are you? Do you have one of them slightly ahead of the other, or are you fence sitting like myself?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of very reluctantly, Joel, I kind of completely agree with what you've just said, because I mean, if you looked at the other matches throughout the Cincinnati tournament, you know, Alcaraz did have a bit more of a battle to get through to the final, you know, with matches against Purcell and Hubert Hurkacz. You know, Jordan Thompson, even there was a couple of three setters in there, really. He had to battle his way through. Djokovic, on the other hand, coming through
very business-like.
Yeah, seamlessly as always. So I think it might come down to if we're having these sort of grueling conditions and how they're making their pathways through to the final. And I don't know who's more vulnerable and susceptible to perhaps a shock early exit. I'd probably still say Alcaraz was more susceptible to that, given Djokovic's experience.
And the other thing to add into the mix is the fact that Carlos Alcaraz is the defending champion. So that's a new situation for him in New York, and that will bring another level of pressure that will be unfamiliar with. So again, it will be interesting to see how that plays on his mind, whether he can just kind of shrug that off and be able to produce his best tennis. But I certainly think from the fans' point of view, I think 95% of them are hoping for part 5, Carlos Alcaraz, Novak Djokovic in a few weeks' time in the US Open men's final.
Yes, I would be lying if I said I also wouldn't be down for that. So before we move on to look at the women's results, though, really fantastic week for Jamie Murray, British player, of course, and his partner Michael Venus of New Zealand, because they got to the men's doubles final. They had a match point, frustratingly, but lost to Maximo Gonzalez and Andres Molteni. But they'll be hoping going into the US Open that they can kind of put their good run of form this year, and put it into sort of some format at Grand Slam, because they've had 3 titles together this year. So looking good for Jamie.
I think Jamie Murray's he's become like the forgotten man. I feel behind Neil Skupski and Joe Salisbury. So nice to see him, I think, get to the final. But I feel like they've been in this situation a few times of 1 point here or there, taking the title, not taking the title. And a few times now, they've just not been able to close it, which is, I think, really, really frustrating. But it's still impressive to see, I think, Jamie Murray produce this level of tennis. I think, he's been around, a bit longer. But I think, certainly you see, I think players like Rajiv Ram have shown that on the doubles circuit, the older you get, the more success it can bring. So I think, it's really exciting for Jamie, particularly going into Flushing Meadows and seeing, where that can take him, because, they defeated Koolhof and Skupski, the top seeds here. So despite not getting the result here in the title, they'll definitely have a lot of confidence going into that.
Yeah, and from a British perspective, it's great that, we've got both Neil Skupski and Jamie Murray going strong really in the doubles. So great for Jamie, who is a bit of a veteran now on the doubles game, but like you said, still going strong.
Is he the veteran on the doubles circuit? Because as I said, I feel like they all play till they're
is he still a spring
40.
chicken then?
Yeah.
I mean, one player who is very much still a spring chicken, Coco Gauff, of course, still only, I think, 19 years of age, but has just picked up the biggest title of her career, her first 1,000 event in Cincinnati. She beat Karolina Muchova in the final, the French Open finalist, but it was straight sets to Coco Gauff. Quite a straightforward scoreline, 6-3, 6-4. But Gauff having the most fantastic hardcourt season, in the summer and in the US and Canada so far. The last time I saw her, play
Sophia
live
Kenin.
was, losing to Kenin, first round of Wimbledon, very disappointing for her. But she's certainly rebounded with, a great run of form, winning the title in DC, getting to the quarters in Montreal, just, narrowly missing out to Pegula, who obviously won the title. And now she's won Cincinnati, but, yes, she beat Muchova in the final, but she beat Iga in the semis, which was probably the real story of the fortnight. Of the last week, sorry. Yeah,
I mean, she was 7-0 in terms of losses to wins in that rivalry against Swiatek, and I looked at some of those matches and the set score lines. They weren't even competitive, and it was interesting to hear because Gauff actually spoke about the Djokovic Monfils rivalry, and she was like, guys, it's like this rivalry is getting that way, and it's just like I don't want that to become a thing for Gauff Swiatek. So it was great to see her raise her level and get the win against the world number one, because as you said, she's going into her home Grand Slam. She reached the quarterfinals last year, and she's just playing such great tennis at the moment. And going back to that result against Sophia Kenin, where it just went horribly wrong for her in her first match. The forehand just completely broke down, was very, very ugly. I think in a weird way, she sort of needed that. It was like I think, at the time it probably hurt and it probably stung and it didn't feel great. But just looking back on that moment, I think it almost kind of served a purpose in actually sort of resetting and recalibrating her and being like, right, well, this has happened. Something's got to change. And, the fact that she's brought Brad Gilbert on, she's had a new coach come on board also in the last few months. It's really, really, working. And the fact that we're still sort of in the infancy of that working relationship with this sort of team that she has now, it feels like it's only going to go and get better. They would have, I think, worked on tweaks to her game, particularly in her kind of weaknesses, which I would say around her forehand, the serve, and also the return. But again, there are being massive gains being made, particularly I think in terms of the weight of shot that she is bringing to the court, particularly with the forehand. The speeds are a lot higher, and as a result, that forehand to me has become a lot more devastating, has become a lot more of a weapon. And for Coco Gauff, that means it can take her places, and it's taken her to be a 500 champion. It's taken her to be now a 1,000 champion, and who's to say it can't take her to be a Grand Slam champion
in the same summer, perhaps? Just going up and up and up each time. I think bringing someone fresh in like Brad Gilbert is a great move. Sometimes that's what is needed, that burst of like fresh blood into your team, a couple of tweaks here and there, and it seems to be paying off so far. And I just think, yeah, she's rebounded super well after that disappointing Wimbledon, and she's on hard courts, which she loves. She's playing at home. And, we saw with her doubles partner last week, JPEG, winning in Montreal. Now Coco Gauff picked up a title. I'm assuming they're still going to be playing doubles at the US Open together. So, that's going to be a formidable pairing if they're both in great form as well. But I just think, it's fantastic to see, because we've been talking about Coco Gauff for so many years. And it is frustrating when her forehand, it does break down. And, it's such a sort of obvious thing that she needs to work on. So it's just such a nice thing to see her having this fantastic summer so far. And she really did kind of get the better of Muchova, in the final. By far the more confident player. She broke immediately, consolidating, and Muchova just didn't really have too much to kind of to give to Coco to sort of fend off what Coco was bringing to the table.
Yeah, and I think Muchova talked about the fact that Coco Gauff she's just very physically fit, and despite having a real battle against the world number one, because how many times do we see players create the upset and then ran out of energy and momentum in the next round, but she was able to carry it on. And I think particularly these conditions, they were tough and they were attritional, and I think she's just very well acclimatized to them. And for Karolina Muchova, I think it did catch up with her a little bit. She did give a lot more fight, I think, in that second set, and it was a little bit nervy for Gauff in the end, because she was, I think, 5-2 up, got back to 5-4. Fortunately, she had a second bite at the cherry to close it. But I just think it shows the confidence that she's playing with, regardless of if there's a step back. She's just going to kind of take a new approach and see what she can do. And it'll be fascinating to see how she gets on at the US Open. I think she's just going to revel in the atmosphere and being at home. We've seen how kind of chilled and how she kind of takes, I think, that tag and being in the United States in her stride. And I think she can really use that to help elevate her game and help potentially get her to go on and win her first Grand Slam singles title, because I certainly think there is an opportunity there, regardless of being 19 years old. It feels like now this summer is, for me, kind of ushers in like the next phase of her career, really. And to me, it's that era of, right, I've now got all the tools available to me. Yeah, maybe there's still work to be done, and I think maybe Brad Gilbert will go away and maybe in the off season, for example, they might look at making more wholesale changes perhaps to her arsenal if the relationship continues. But yeah, at the moment, right here, right now, she is definitely a contender.
Absolutely. And I think just getting that win over Swiatek, going into a Grand Slam knowing you've got that win is such a confidence boost. Because for me as a fan, someone who's watched Coco Gauff for a number of years, that's always been the thing that's stopped me, I guess, predicting her from going all the way, is the fact that she just seems to kind of lose 4-3 against Iga whenever they play. Like, she's not really a contender in those matches, but having beaten her here, it kind of changes that story for me. And I'm just hoping going into the US Open we don't see Coco have that kind of difficulty.
She doesn't have Sophia Ken in first round.
Well, yeah, that. But I mean, also she's got a week off, hasn't she? We saw with Pegula here, straight off the back of Montreal, she fell to Buskova like 4 love. She wasn't able to back that title win up from last week. But we've had a number of players, who did well in Montreal sort of succumb quite early in Cincinnati, and a lot of them retiring. Rybakina, I think Donna Vekic, Mackenzie McDonald for the men, Lajovic. There were 4 retirements from all those players in one day in the middle of their matches. And a lot of them, we saw Yannick Sinner also go out first round after having won in Toronto. I mean, there's no turnaround between the two events, which has led to a lot of early losses, a lot of retirements, and at least we won't be, they do have a week off now before the US Open, which I think is very much needed, because it's just like we were saying with Alcaraz and Djokovic, it's such grueling conditions, and we've seen that with players kind of having a bit of an up and down, from one Masters to another, 2 different stories.
Yeah, the schedule really in the build up to New York is brutal. There is just no breathing room whatsoever. And in fact, there's an overlap. Like there's play in Cincinnati on the Sunday, whilst in Canada there is also play on the Sunday, and it feels too jam packed. And I am aware that the plan is that these tournaments will become 2-week affairs from 2025, and as a result there have been some mutterings of it moving from Cincinnati to nearby to Charlotte. But I just think the schedule needs to be looked at. And last week we were talking about the fact that Canada, some of the stadia doesn't have a roof, and that's a real issue because you've got 1 week. There is not a lot of time to finish these events. I think for here, given just how brutal the conditions have been, the fact that it's the second event and you've got players who are carrying on from, for Rybakina, for example, having played, till 3 a.m., it has a carry-on effect. And I just worry that the fact that we have these back-to-back events in such a short space of time, it doesn't mean we're going to see the best of these players come the US Open. I know they have a week off now, but it's asking a lot, and I think it's asked too much, I think, personally, of the top players that, we're just realistically not going to see them, it's just going to be very hard to see someone like go and make a run of it, to win both of them, for example. I mean, Iga Swiatek, I think she got to the semi-finals of both. So I think that just shows just how difficult and how grueling it is to just go from one to the other.
Yeah, and I think it robs like Cincinnati of as good a tournament as they could have had if you're getting players dropping out early because they just can't can't carry on that momentum and that form from the previous week because they're just absolutely destroyed physically. I think from 2025 it's going to be a 2-week tournament, and I think it's going to move perhaps to Charlotte actually from Cincinnati. So we may see some changes kind of in a couple of years' time. I think they're looking at the calendar to make it a bit fairer on players, and also that will benefit fans as well, because I don't want to watch a match and see someone retire with heat stroke or an injury that has been brought on because they've had literally half a day of rest and they've had to jump on a plane between the tournaments. And with Swiatek, you said she's reached the semi-finals of both tournaments. Obviously, she lost to Coco Gauff. She's been having quite a hard time. I think on social media, she came out saying that she gets so much hate and criticism after losing even a set because people have this, expectation of perfection from her. And that was really sad to see because I know, these players are in the public eye. They do get, unfortunately, online criticism and hate, which is just totally unacceptable. But I guess it's she's just highlighted the issue this week that yes, she lost to Coco Gauff in the semi-finals. She didn't have a perfect tournament, and we have to be mindful that these players are doing their absolute best, and it's difficult conditions, and their schedule is very tricky, and you just can't be perfect and win and win and win. They're not machines.
I know. It's disappointing because I think we've had this discussion in the past with Naomi Osaka, and unfortunately, I think from that point of view, it sort of led to her, I think, falling out of love with the game and going on a break. I certainly think it was like a contributing factor, and it's just something that is ever present. It feels like on the tour, and it just doesn't feel like something obviously that the players want to deal with. I mean, Swiatek was quoted as saying, the amount of hate and criticism me and my team get after losing a set is ridiculous. I want to encourage people to be more thoughtful when they comment on the internet. We all sacrifice a lot. We're all working really hard to be in that place. We're always giving 100% of what we can do every day. So, she's championing and using her number one ranking as a platform, I think, to kind of help with that. But it's, I think, a shame that this isn't a new situation. We've been here lots and lots of times before, but I guess it shows for Swiatek, like the level she is playing at. Any one thing, one step, one minute thing out of place, people going to jump on her, and it just seems ridiculously unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we hope that going into the US Open, all of that kind of, I mean, I say it's not going to die down, is it? Because it's a fact of life, very sadly, that these online trolls and haters exist. But, I hope that people can, by speaking out, that, it draws attention to it, and some people may think twice. But let's take a quick break now. We'll be back in the second half to discuss the return of the Elite Trophy in Zhuhai, where on earth the WTA end of season finals may be later in the year, and we'll also be looking at the final two tournaments before the US Open. We've got Winston-Salem and also tennis in the land this week, so do not go anywhere. Welcome back to the Tennis Weekly podcast, sponsored by downloadtennis.com. Now we're going to move on to a mysterious player, which we haven't had in a long time, Joel. So I'm quite excited.
A long time between you and me. I actually did a mysterious player last week with Chris, and I don't want to toot my own horn, but to be honest, I am. I think I did pretty well.
You are a genius.
Yeah, exactly. I personally think I'm better at mysterious player than Path of the Court. The pressure just gets to me, and I'm much better in a mysterious player setting.
You love just knowing players' birthdays, maybe. Okay, what have you got for me then, and for our listeners?
Right. This is the set of clues I have you. I'm going to start with clue number 1 for you and our listeners, and it is this. I was born on March 23rd, 1985.
1985. Okay, so they are 38 years old. Okay. So they're sort of that Rafael Nadal generation, but like a year older. Feliciano Lopez is older than that, but it could be someone like Tommy Robredo.
Incorrect. It's not.
Okay.
I'll move on to the next clue. I have a career high WTA singles ranking of 30, which I achieved in July 2011.
Right. Okay. Definitely not Tommy Robredo then. WTA ranked 30, 2011. 38 years of age. Patty Schneider?
Incorrect. It's not Patty Schneider. I like that guess though. Love that. I love that name. Love that reference. Right. Next clue. My best results at singles in Grand Slams is round 4 at Wimbledon 2008 and in the French Open 2013.
2008 Wimbledon and 2013 French Open.
They'll get a little bit easier after this one.
That's all right. I've got a sudden thought.
Ooh, okay.
Of who it might be, but I really don't know. I mean, I think they're more of a doubles player, but probably of a similar age. And I think they got to like a 4th round of singles. Maria Jose Martinez Sanchez.
Wow. That is a great name. And I like the thinking there. but it's incorrect.
Oh, okay.
But this might help you. I am a former doubles world number 1, which I achieved in January 2017.
Oh, okay. Doubles. Sanya Mirza? Do you think she got to, was she 30 in singles as well?
Incorrect. It's not Sanya Mirza.
Okay.
Okay, next clue. I played the 2021 French Open with Iga Swiatek, ending up as runners-up to Barbora Krejcikova and Katerina Siniakova.
Swiatek got to a doubles final.
I know.
Oh, was that the year that Swiatek won the
I think that was the year she beat
singles?
Simona Halep in the 4th round.
Oh, okay. Oh, and that was the year that Krejcikova won the singles because she won both, didn't she? So Swiatek got to the doubles final. Who did she play with? Age 38. That's really tough. Has been doubles number 1. Not Hingis. No, that's ridiculous. She's been higher than 30 in singles. Bet the listeners have got this and they're shouting at me through their
I'm going to have to hurry
headphones.
you, Kim.
Svetlana Kuznetsova. No, that's completely wrong as well.
Incorrect. It's
I've got
not
Jill
Svetlana.
Krabas.
It's not Jill Krabas either. No. Right. Move on to the next clue. I've won a mixed doubles Grand Slam title with Jamie Murray.
Oh, it's not Jelena Jankovic because she's been higher than 30 in singles. Jamie Murray. Yes, he did win a slam, didn't he? Bethany Mattek-Sands.
That is the correct answer. Yes, it's Bethany Mattek-Sands. Very good.
Excellent.
Yes.
Got there in the end.
Yes, I was sort of worried. I was a little bit worried because I only had 2 clues left. One was around her fashion. That was my last. That was going to be my last clue around her. I'm known for being a bit of a fashion icon on the tennis court, and obviously, who can forget her striped cowboy hat at the 2005 US Open, which got her fined. And I also remember she had that really bad injury, didn't she, at Wimbledon to her knee against Sorana Castella. So that was going to be my other clue. So it was Bethany Mattek-Sands, who I think pretty handy singles and doubles player.
Yeah, I used to enjoy watching her, and she used to play, and they won quite a few slams with Lucy Shavajova as well.
Very good, very
pairing.
good. Yes.
Yeah. No, fantastic. Thank you very much, Joel. I hope our listeners did better than I did, but we got there in the end. So let's have a look at what's in the Tennis Weekly mailbag. We haven't actually gone with a listener question this week. We've gone with something that we've seen on social media. So big shout out to tennis social media guru Bastian Fakan for the inspiration, because he tweeted, with Jannik Sinner winning his first Masters title in Toronto, who, in your opinion, is now the best active player currently on the ATP Tour to not have won a Masters title or Grand Slam? So Sinner's obviously ticked off that Masters title now, but who do we think, is the best active player who is still yet to get a Masters or a Slam?
Talon Griekspoor.
Talon Griekspoor. Well, watch this space, Joel.
Yeah, no. I mean, for me, there's a few names you could throw into the ring here, but I am going to go for Kei Nishikori, who I just think he was very unlucky in terms of a player similar to like a Marin Cilic and a Tomas Berdych played. His peak was around when I think the big four were around. Murray, Djokovic, Nadal and Federer, and it was just very, very hard for him to even have a chance of winning. And he got to 4 finals and he lost all of his finals to either Nadal or Djokovic. And I just think his level that he showed, and particularly what he showed at Grand Slams as well, for me, I think he deserves. I don't even think he's like a token sort of Masters champion. I think he probably deserves a few Masters title given the levels that he's shown throughout his career, particularly in his peak.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. I think he definitely had or has the capability to have won a Masters. It's just that kind of playing in the wrong era almost. I personally have gone for someone like Berrettini. I think if we had a Masters on grass in the run up to Wimbledon,
Yes, I could see
if
that.
Queens was a Masters, I think he would definitely have got one. And I think Casper Ruud will surely one day will surely one day win a clay Masters.
Yeah.
I feel like it's inevitable that he'll pick one up along the way. And I would say, like, maybe, I guess Kyrgios would have it in him as well, and has obviously been close with winning a slam, as has Ruud and Berrettini. They've all been finalists, so they're the ones I would have to pick. But yeah, I think that's an interesting food for thought. And I guess there are so many players that you could. I mean, I think anyone on their day we've known, has played lights out tennis. I remember Coric last summer winning. Was it Cincinnati?
It can happen. Those sort of, I don't want to say flash in the pan, but someone can just bring a level of tennis for a week and win the title at the end of it, and it can happen at on the ATP side at Masters tournaments. I just think, for me personally, Nishikori did have a level of consistency before. It feels like his body just kind of repeatedly breaks down on him, which is really annoying. But when he did have that consistency and he was making, finals, it's just coming up against players who are just generational talents. And for him, that must be, I guess, really frustrating because, as I said, I think he's deserving of definitely more than one, Masters title in his trophy cabinet.
Yeah, I believe so. Let's have a look at the sort of news that's come out in the last few days to a week. We've had an announcement that the WTA Elite Trophy is back, and it's going to be in Zhuhai. So this tournament is the one that's kind of the level below the end of season finals. It's basically brings players ranked 9 to 19 in the year end rankings on the WTA together to play, a similar format to the end of season finals, where they're put into groups of 3 and it's like a round robin format. There's also a doubles version as well. So this is going to be out in China at the end of October. But what do you make of this, Joel? Because obviously this has been announced. We don't even know where the end of season finals is going to be. Yeah, this is like the sort of second class event, if you like. It's obviously it's an elite trophy. People want to be there. It's a tournament to play, and if you can't get into the end of season finals,
do they call it the elite trophy just to get over that sort of perception that it is the backup? It is the second division to the end of season finals.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, maybe they shouldn't. Should they be doing this at all, or should they not have like a next gen for the WTA? What do you think? What would bring in more, I guess, publicity and money? I suppose.
Yeah, I'm surprised that they have announced bringing this back. I think in terms of end of season tournaments, rather than have the premiere event, which I think has some issues still going on to it, particularly around the fact that obviously we don't know where it is, and last year in Fort Worth, 4 people, it felt like, turned up at times to a big empty arena. The fact that we've kind of gone ahead and announced this, it almost feels like we're focusing resources and attention elsewhere, when I think we should putting all our, WTA should be putting all their focus and resources, as I said, into the end of season final, which isn't fully known, and the details of it are just not out there in the public domain at the moment. And if there was a supporting tournament to that, I think they should follow the ATP's model and have the end of season finals and then the next gen finals, because I certainly think there are some exciting talents on the WTA tour at the moment that would fit into that next gen category. And I think fans would be more excited to see those next generation talents go at it in an experimental format, wherever it is in the world, in an indoor setting. I think that to them and for me is more exciting than seeing players ranked 9 to 19, which we know that some will drop out. And in theory, yes, it will be top 20 players, but the reality is, players are going to drop out and it's going to become a bit of a mishmash like we've seen in the past. I'm not totally sold on it, to be honest.
Yeah, I feel like the jury's out, and also, being in China, we've still all got the whole situation with Peng Shuai. I think, a lot of people are not happy that the WTA have gone back into China, and obviously we've discussed this on the podcast before. They have their reasons. A lot of it's financial. China's one of the only few places that's willing to put up a certain amount of money, and that's hard to say no to when there's such disparity between the women's tour and the men's tour. So they have their reasons, but I mean, it's good that there is this event for players of that ranking, and I'm sure there will be players who would more than happy to go out and pick up the prize money that they'll be offering. But yeah, I'm not sure it's the greatest event in the calendar as a fan.
Would you like to see an ATP equivalent of the Elite Trophy on the men's side?
I mean, I love tennis. I'm a tennis fan. I'm not going to say no to a tournament, I guess, but is it really providing that kind of spectacle in the same way that the world's top 8 is going to do? It's the world's second 8 doesn't quite have the same pizzazz, does it? So I think doing something like an experimental next gen where you're watching for kind of the innovations and the young prospects, that has a better selling point. And one player that is frustrated with the lack of knowing where the actual end of season finals is going to be, she's probably going to be there, is Ons Jabeur. She's come out to say that she doesn't know where it's going to be held. It's frustrating, that she wants a decision as soon as possible, and they want to get promoting the event. And it's just, it seems quite weak from the top of the game, the WTA leadership, that we're not sure where it's going to be. And I think a lot of people are saying it might end up in like Saudi Arabia, who are going to, they're one of the places that will pay pots of money for it. But how many fans are going to travel there? How many people will agree with it being there? So it raises, some sort of ethical quandaries, doesn't it, when we're waiting on a decision, and when we get finally that decision, will people be happy?
It's ridiculous. And I think, we were in this situation last year, and I can't believe we're in the same situation again. And we saw in Fort Worth that there was just not enough time for it to be promoted in the right way and have enough publicity to make people aware that this event was happening, to get bums on seats, big crowds, championing and celebrating the top 8 female players in the world. And the more time that comes and goes, that ticks on, the less chance there is going to be to promote the event. And the more I'm worried about the fact that we're probably going to get an event where, again, 5-6 people turn up for group stage matches, and it feels a real shame because, as I said, the WTA feels like it's having a movement this year. We're talking about the big 4 with Swiatek, Coco Gauff coming to the party, Rybakina, Sabalenka, Jessie Pegula, and again, it feels like the WTA, are they going to be capitalizing on this set of fantastic athletes that they have at their disposal? And the answer is probably not. And I think what's really galling about it is, you just have to compare it to how the ATP do things, and it feels very clear cut and night and day. And we're sort of in this situation of the fact that top players have no idea what's going on. It's not good enough. And I do worry that, we might end up in Saudi Arabia because they have the most money, but is it going to be the greatest spectacle? And, they're going to be full capacity crowds there. I think it might just end up in another Fort Worth situation.
Yeah, exactly. That may well be what we end up getting. So we'll keep an eye out for all the news.
Unless they bring it to the O2 Arena in London, right?
The O2 Arena, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it? We're not at all biased in us wanting it in London, but let's have a look at what we've got on the circuit this week, though, because we do have a couple of events. In the last week before the US Open, we've got Winston-Salem for the men, and we've also got Tennis in the Land, which is out in Cleveland for the women.
Winston-Salem with the biggest 250 draw I think I've ever seen. It feels a bit too ridiculous that they've got 16 seeds and they've been given a bye into the round 2 of an ATP 250.
Yeah, it does seem a bit drastic, doesn't it? Maybe they're thinking, players who have been at, Montreal and then Cincinnati, they need to they need to have that extra day, or that extra buy going into Winston-Salem. I guess it encourages more people to play it before the US Open, because people are quite reluctant to do so. But there we go. But we do have Talon Griekspoor, one of your faves, Joel, it seems. Borna Koric, they are the top 2 seeds. Max Purcell is there. He did very well in Cincinnati.
Yeah, he's doing very well, I think, over the last few weeks. Very, very handy player. He's I think just about to win to get into the second round. Jack Draper as well, also in the draw. Britain's Jack Draper. Nice to see him back into the tour.
He's already got his first win over Nuno Borges, so great for Jack. But I feel like got Seb Korda in there as well. He'll be hoping for some good form going into his home slam. So I feel like it's anyone's for the taking, but there are a few names who are we're sort of earmarking, I suppose. Some last sort of minute run of form. Going into the US Open, some people will be relying on these matches to get that form up. And then on the women's side of things, they're out in Cleveland. We've got 250 Tennis in the Land, great name. Caroline Garcia.
We were obsessed with that name, aren't we? Where did that come from? I mean, it's just so bold and not like anything else, is it?
No, it's
Why
it's
isn't it the Cleveland
different.
Open?
But we've got Garcia as the top seed. She's taken a wild card. She's pretty much desperate for some form, I think. It's not been great for her.
No, it's not, has it? It's not been pretty.
No, not at all. And she's actually just stepping onto court now as we're recording this against Linda Fruhvirtova. So we will see what happens there. Krejcikova also there. I think she's already out. Clara Tauson has defeated her. It's anyone's for taking, really. Sloane Stephens is there, so Chris will be hoping she has a great week as well in the run up to the US.
I mean, it's only sad. Venus Williams was scheduled to play, and she was meant to play Mira Andreeva, but she decided to withdraw. I was gutted about that, Kim, because I can't think of, in terms of like age differential between two players, I can't think of anything that's more drastic than Venus Williams versus Andreeva, which is, what is that, 16 years old versus 40, 41, 42?
That would probably be the biggest age difference that we could have had. Yeah, I would say. Yeah,
Listeners, let us know. Can you think of any other big differentials between two players you've stepped onto the WTA or the ATP tour? I'd love to know. But sadly we haven't got that because Venus Williams has dropped out.
It may never happen. We may never have that big age gap.
I know, and we've also got the US Open coming up, which I'm very excited about. Fourth and final major of the year. Tennis Weekly will, of course, be doing our round-by-round coverage, starting with our US Open preview episode on Thursday. So I hope you can join us for that. But listeners, I hope you've enjoyed our latest episode of the Tennis Weekly podcast. Remember to subscribe to us to stay up to date on all the action to come from the ATP and WTA tours. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and all major podcasting platforms out there. And if you like what you're hearing, then make sure to leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
You can also follow us on social media or email the show. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok and YouTube at Tennis Weekly Pod. You can also purchase Tennis Weekly merchandise now at etsy.com/shop/Tennis Weekly Podcast. So do go and check out our offering on there.
I'm wearing my hat at the moment.
Joel is wearing his lovely Tennis Weekly hat as we're recording. He's fully in the Tennis Weekly zone, and I've been using my tote bag to get out and about.
Got to live the brand, Kim. Got to live the brand.
Living the Tennis Weekly brand. So yeah, everyone, you can as well. So go check out the Etsy shop. You can also drop us an email on tennisweeklypod@gmail.com, and don't forget to check out our website as well, tennisweekly.co.uk.
And we will be back on Thursday at Tennis Weekly HQ for our US Open preview. So I hope you can join us for that. But in the meantime, it's goodbye from Kim.
Goodbye.
And it's goodbye from me. We'll see you again soon.